Thanks for tuning into the special edition of the Renshaw Report. Murray the hour reporter from the city, Too Tough today, New London. And our guest today is Congressman Joe Courtney. And Joe represents the 2nd Congressional District, which includes New London County, Toland County, Windham County, along with parts of Hartford, Middlesex, New Haven counties. But the principal cities that he represents are Enfield, Norwich, New London, and Groton. Joe has served 9 consecutive terms as our congressman and is seeking this year his 10th term. Congressman Courtney has been very successful in his bipartisan ways and mannerisms, which has resulted in huge job creations, which is why so many opportunities exist in our area this day. Incidentally, Joe, it looks like you're building submarines out in the parking lot here as we drove in. You got them going every place. But, Joe, if you would elaborate with what you regard as your accomplishments in the last legislative session. I know there's 3 or 4 issues that are on your high priority list.
So thank you again for stopping by, and you got a great guest here with you in the studio here this afternoon. And first of all, I would make one edit to your description of the district. Actually, Vernon, where I live, is the 4th largest town in the 2nd Congressional District. It's actually bigger than New London, in terms of population. Sometimes
it was bigger than New London, Joe, but it isn't anymore.
New London's growing. There's no question about it. So you may be right on that point. But anyway, so look, this has been a tough couple of years. I mean, really more than just a couple of years in terms of just, the gridlock down there is very daunting in terms of, getting, priorities passed through the Congress. But, in terms of the economy, which I still think is always the number one issue in the 2nd District, it's a very, kind of working family, middle class family district, and they're, they don't, they're not really interested in a member of Congress who just goes on cable shows and does social media posts. They want to actually see some real results in terms of, really strengthening, family economic security. I'm ranking member on the Sea Power Subcommittee on Armed Services, was chair for 4 years when the Democrats were in control. Have a great working relationship with the Republican chair, Trent Kelly. He's from Mississippi. And we are good friends. We've traveled together. My wife and his wife are friends. So we've been really focused in terms of just, again, keeping the shipbuilding accounts strong, getting the contracts approved. And so if you were to ask me, what was something that I could point to when I first got elected, the shipyard workforce was about 8,000, had come down dramatically from the end of the Cold War when it was about 28,000 at that point. Today, it's climbed back up to 23,000. And if you look at the shipbuilding plans that, again, our subcommittee has approved, they're going to be at 33,000, probably sometime in the early 2030s. With COVID and the great retirement, where a lot of people, the older workforce, basically decided to retire early, with all the work coming in. I mean, it's really been a challenge in terms of getting new workers trained up and ready to fill a lot of those positions and take on the work that's there. But we've worked really hard with the Eastern Connecticut Workforce Board to design a curriculum for really accelerated metal trades training. So they've graduated now their 4,000th pre-apprenticeship graduate from the Manufacturing Pipeline Initiative. And the good news about that program is that other shipyards have tried to do somewhat similar things. I think their curriculum is not really designed the right way, because our folks who go through that program, the retention rate is very high. It's about 86% from last year when they hired 5,300 people. They've hired 3,000 people so far this year. I was on the phone with Kevin Graney, the CEO, a couple days ago, and again, they're really close to high 80s, 90% retention. You go down to Newport News, Virginia, which is the other sort of big shipyard that works together on the submarine programs. They're really having a bad time. I mean, we're talking 30% retention that's there. So So, right now, if you just do a quick snapshot of where things stand, as I said, 23,000 is the workforce. I check every morning in terms of what the job openings are, 886 job openings, right as we're sitting here today. So the hiring is going to keep continuing. But the problem, and it was in the day the other day, is that because Newport News is having trouble, keeping their, workforce levels where they ought to be, their production cadence is really slipped, and it's slowing down the Virginia class program. And we've talked to the Navy a lot about the fact that they got to come up here and look at what we're doing and replicate that down in Virginia, because that's the only way we're going to get out of this slowdown. Which again, it's not because Congress doesn't want to fund shipbuilding or submarine construction. It's really just the slowdown is just caused by the fact that their job training programs are just not meeting the challenge that exists down there. So we're working to try and get the pipeline folks to go down there and sort of walk through what the what the curriculum looks like, and hopefully get them sort of back on track. A lot of other supply chain companies are also getting work because of this the budgets that we've been passing. And in this region right here, Joe Delacruz, at Hillary and Company over in Groton, he's a big supply chain company. It's a machinist union shop that's there. And Joe left the legislature because he was so busy. He just said he couldn't do both jobs because the demand is there. So, and right now, they would hire tonight, if they could get some more people there. It's a good problem to have, in my opinion, because it means the region's growing. And, but now there's other issues that have to be dealt with, like housing, because we've got people coming into the area that, are trying to find an affordable place to live. You talk to Kevin Graney, he talks about affordable childcare, because, these are now sort of young families that people are going to work at. And that's obviously in short supply in the region there. But I was out at the factory gates Wednesday morning last week, shaking hands, and I got to tell you, Murray, I used to know a lot of the old timers when they were coming through there. It's a completely new cast of characters that are coming in there. I think it's great because they're young, and I know the work is going to be there. So this is these are like careers that we're seeing, and I think the ripple effect in terms of new construction for things like housing and infrastructure. It's all good.
Let's talk about housing a little bit, Joe, because
Sure.
you've launched a couple of initiatives to try to ease that burden. But what can be done, and how can government deal with a serious problem? Because that ties into my inflation question,
Right.
the housing issue. What can government and what can you do to help relieve the people or
Right.
give us some relief as
'Cause
to
when you talk about cost of living, the cost of rents and getting a mortgage or whatever, that's in some ways the biggest part of your budget that's there. So you're right. They are tied together. So in my opinion, there's two ways that you have to deal with it. Number one, you got to increase supply. There's just it's a simple economics of supply and demand. When the supply is tight, prices go up because people are competing for those units. And and there has been some signs of action, happening. New London, the mayor said that 1,000 new units have gone up in the city. That's there. A lot of them are market rents. Some of them are affordable.
they start out at $2,400 a month, Joe.
No, that's very high. I'm not saying that that solves the problem. It makes it it actually reinforces what the problem is that we have to solve. So I was over at Bayonet Street the other day in New London, where again they put in 27 new affordable units. There's another 36 that are under construction as we speak right now. And again, it was funded by low-income housing tax credits, which doesn't mean public housing or ugly brick cinder block structures. They're nice units, but when the developer gets the benefit of the credit, they have to agree to tie the rent to people's income level. So that makes it affordable for people. Most of them are working people who are going to move into those units. Some of there is a set aside for people with disabilities that's there. But I was up in Mansfield South Eagleville Road, there's 42 units of affordable housing that are going up there. Again, the workforce in stores, in terms of that people who either work at the university or work in the local economy, they can't afford to live there. So this unit, I mean, the minute it went public that it was being built, is 42 units. I mean, they had 200 applications for leases that are there, and it just shows again that that we're way short in terms of supply.
Is this on the top burner, the front burner with you guys up in Washington?
I'll tell you, to me, and I've been there a while, as you said, I have never seen housing now getting the attention and priority that I've ever experienced. Because really, it's not just housing advocates that are talking about it. We had a roundtable here in Waterford a couple weeks ago where we had the Connecticut home builders, realtors, as well as some of the housing advocates. That everybody's now together. We need more supply of housing that's there. And
but what could the catalyst be to make a difference?
So if you talk to the home builders, and they were at the table at this event, I mean, they like the low-income housing tax credit because that makes the numbers work in terms of building new units. They've been pushing, a tax credit for starter homes, for new construction of starter homes, because that slice of the market, it basically doesn't almost exist anymore. I mean, the days when you could go buy a house for $150,000 or get an affordable mortgage. I mean, the realtors are saying that the average median price in America today for a one family is $400,000 across the country. Again, there's crazy numbers out in California and places like that sort of skew it, but Connecticut's high, for even a modest. So having a starter home tax credit, which the home builders have been pushing, Kamala Harris has endorsed it. She's already been talking about it too. And then also the down payment assistance that sort of helps the other end of the transaction in terms of people, who need help getting a down payment together. But as I said, to me, the housing supply, after the Great Recession, housing construction dipped, and it really never recovered. And so as a result, we're millions of units short in this country.
You were on a Hartford show, I think this weekend, and you stated that one of the biggest problems you thought was confronting us today was the division that we seem to be going through these days. What can you do? What can be done to bring us together as a country? It's a serious problem, regardless of what side you're on. And I mean, you've been very successful in your bipartisan mythology to overcome that. But as a nation, it seems like we're becoming more and more divided. Is that a top priority with you as well?
No, it always is. I mean, it's, on one hand, I'm not going to sit here and say, it's just a question of we got to go, play a round of golf together or go to dinner together, which is always a good thing to do because it kind of.
Not according to Ricky Fink playing golf with you.
I'm a golfer and I love it. And we just had our Democrat versus Republican tournament, which I mentioned to you, which is actually a healthy thing to just get people out of the hothouse and get them just sort of spend a little bit of time and learn something about people. So, I mean, there's that piece of it because, the schedule in Washington when you go down there, I mean, it's almost immediately the two sides have their caucus meetings, apart from each other. There's no really sort of structural integration or intermingling that goes on there. The committees, you're spending some time with people. Armed Services is a very healthy committee. Really, the two sides work together, I think, pretty impressively. But, other committees, it is scorched earth that's there. And, part of it is, I think people they need to ask themselves, okay, why am I here? Am I here to go on cable shows, no offense, or, on social media and just sort of be into all the performance, stuff, which gets lots of clicks and people like it and all that. But that doesn't do anything. The question is really whether you're going to do the work, in terms of, figuring out budgets and figuring out authorization bills that are actually going to make a difference for people. So the housing issue, which we just talked about, I mean, okay, the builders are telling us if you give us these tax credits for construction, we'll build more units. We tried to pass a bill this Congress to do that, to expand light tech, as it's called. Got through the House. actually pretty nicely, over 300 votes, and then it got filibustered in the Senate, which to me, it just blows your mind, because it's just like, when did housing become sort of a partisan,
Well,
battle?
Joe, could it be that language you guys put behind the real problem in all these bills that you try to pass that is preventing us from moving forward? Because both sides do it. Let's face it.
So but just remember, like I said, the housing bill passed in the House, the U.S. House, by a lopsided margin, and it went through committee process. There was no hide the ball games that were being done. This wasn't negotiated in the last minute and stuff was getting stuffed in there. It was completely transparent. So to me, it was just people didn't want one side to get credit for success. It's too close to the election. We can't do it right now. But in the meantime, we've got people who are really desperate for affordable rents.
Was the last session the most difficult session in your entire career in Congress with what's going on today in this world today?
There's no question. I've never seen a session where a Speaker of the House, it took 2 weeks for his people to come together and pick their leader. Then they threw him overboard less than a year later. And then the House shut down for a month while they were sort of trying to figure out who's going to be the replacement. And it's, so as a result, if you look at the end product in terms of how many bills have actually gotten through, you got to go back really almost to the Civil War to see that low rate production that's there. And it's, really, there's things like this housing bill that we just talked about. There's so many other issues that really, they're not partisan. They're really not any reason for people to obstruct, but it's been pretty bad. And I think, if you ask my opinion what's going to happen in the election for the House, I think it could go either way, honestly. But even if it goes Democrat, it'll be a razor-thin majority. If it goes Republican, it's going to be a razor-thin majority. And at some point, it's about math. You can't expect to be a productive Congress if you're just saying, we're only going to talk to our own people about what gets to the floor for final passage. Johnson did bring some measures to the floor over the objections of some of his people, which I voted for. The supplemental for Israel, Ukraine, and the Indo-Pacific region. Again, the minute he brought that to the floor and we passed it and sent it to Biden for signature, Marjorie Taylor Greene filed a motion to vacate, and we had a vote in terms of whether or not they were going to kick him out. It would be the second speaker kicked out, and I voted to support Johnson, to keep him in the seat, because enough is enough.
So with regard to our local area, sub-base, EB, huge victories for the people because of the jobs and what it's done for the economy. What else did you feel you accomplished?
Well, one thing
session?
in 2022, which is right before the end of the last session, getting that prescription drug bill passed that allowed the government to negotiate better rates in terms of the Medicare program, and they just finished the first 10 medications, saved 40 to 80% on those first 10 prescription drugs. They're going to be doing 10 and 15 in successive years. When you and I were talking back in 2006, my first run for when we were running that year, we were talking about prescription drug costs. We finally did something.
I wasn't taking them then.
Me either. So, but really, honestly, that's about putting money in people's pockets for something. Insulin, capping it at $35 a month. People were paying 2/3 more than that at the time, and that drug has been off patent since the early 1900s. there was no excuse for people.
What kind of shape is Medicare in?
Because of this prescription drug bill, it's in better shape because we're not wasting money. And if we keep it on track, which there's people who would like to repeal the bill, believe it or not, but if you keep it on track, it's gonna help Medicare stronger, because prescription drugs, we all know this, that's almost like half of medicine right now.
What percentage of the population in your district are senior citizens?
It's high. So if Larson always puts out the numbers for Social Security retirees in each district, and second district's the highest, and it's around 100, and I have to I think it's around 150,000. It might be even closer to 160,000. There's 720,000 people that live in the district total. So that's a big number.
So Joe, we don't have a lot of time. I know you're
Yep.
busy, but I do have some other questions to get to. But is there anything else you'd like to mention? I mean, you pulled off that Australian deal,
Yes.
which is a benefit to. That's a win-win situation for everybody. Is there anything else you'd like to tell us about?
So the Australian government, I don't know if you saw they're going to give me. I'm becoming an officer.
I saw that.
Yeah. So next time you're going to have to call me Sir Joseph.
Okay, Sir Joseph, you got it.
I'm very excited about that. The embassy was just great to work with, and they love America. They just love America, and it's very sincere.
Oh, you want to get to some other
Sure,
of these
absolutely.
questions?
Yeah.
So we've done a survey, and partial survey,
Yeah.
down at Shaw Street, and we've come to the conclusion that the two major issues of this election of cost of living and border security, which ties into immigration. What's your view of immigration? Can you set the record straight? Because I, as well as many other people, don't know who to believe.
Right.
And by the way, where would you suggest we go to watch independent analysis of what's going on in this world?
So personally, I think the Department of Homeland Security, they put out monthly reports, which shows the number of encounters at the at the border, and they also report the number of deportations of people who are being removed.
Well, let's talk about that immigration and
Sure.
border
No,
security
absolutely.
right
Yeah.
now. Is it a problem? And clarify this, set the record straight. Did we bring in 10 million, 20 million? How many illegal, and I don't know what to call them because I don't want to insult anybody,
Right.
but the fact of the matter is they're here illegally. What's the count on that, and what is it costing the American taxpayer?
So there's roughly, I mean, the estimates I see is around 10 to 12 million is in that range that's there. So it's a lot of people. A lot of them are working out there. They cannot collect Social Security. Some of them are paying into Social Security because they're using false identification, to do that. I mean, there are bad guys in that group.
How could it be? How could it be that we let these bad people into our country?
Well, again, that number goes back more than just the last 3 years. I mean, this is a population that's been, in the country for a number of years. But so last February I went down to El Paso, visited the member of Congress, Veronica Escobar, who invited members to come down there. So El Paso is on the Rio Grande. On one side is El Paso, the other side is Juarez, Mexico. Juarez actually is bigger than El Paso. And we met with the Border Patrol guys and Customs Enforcement. And to me, that was the guys that I wanted to hear from. Because they live it, every single day. So it was February. Last December was horrible. I mean, the numbers, if you look at, again, those monthly statistics, it just shot up in terms of what was happening down there. And by February, it was starting to come down. It has come down significantly since even February that's there, which is good. But these guys were beat. I mean, they were working 16-hour days that were there. And, while they were there, sometimes they were getting moved to Arizona because, it was a hot spot there and they had to get people over there and move them back. And the one good thing that we did in Congress is that we finally got a Homeland Security budget through that allowed them to hire another 20,000 people, to fill up the ranks there because they were just burning out, when we were there. They also, we were there. So El Paso, it's a port of entry. So there's a bridge that comes over from Juarez, and it's it almost looks like George Washington Bridge, or it's a very busy bridge that comes through there. And these guys, their job is to try and screen what's coming over there. And they had bad equipment in terms of fentanyl detection that's there. That's so highly concentrated that you can bring a profitable amount, and it's very hard to detect with just old-fashioned X-ray equipment. So they have new detection sensors. It looks like a car wash. The car drives through, the truck drives through, or whatever, and it can find the stuff that's there. And we've passed the budget. They got more boots on the ground and got more equipment down there. It should have passed much earlier, but hindsight's 2020. So I actually think, and my nephew, I think I've told you this before, works in Arizona. He's a Border Patrol agent, Philip, and I do think that between changing the asylum rules, which Biden finally, he signed the executive order in June that tightened up who can claim asylum, and as a result, you see the deportation numbers have really picked up. They're sending people back, and he again will forever be criticized for what happened during his time that's there. But honestly, I mean, at this point, if you look at the numbers that DHS is putting out, the deportations are up, and the encounters at the border have come down from last December.
We have an immigration policy in this country that we can't seem to adhere to for some reason. Why can't we solve this problem? I mean, you guys are from academia up there. Most of you are lawyers. I mean, you're smart people, the smartest of the smartest. Why can't we solve this problem?
So when was the last time Congress passed an immigration bill? Answer, 1986. Reagan was president, and it was a bipartisan bill. It was Simpson-Mazzoli. Simpson was a Republican from Wyoming. Mazzoli was Democrat.
Alan Simpson?
Yes.
Yeah.
And Mazzoli was a House member, Democrat from New Jersey. And they passed the bill. Reagan signed it into law. The world has changed so much since 1986 on the border. We need to update it, and that's because honestly, a president does have limitations under the law about how much discretion they have to do it. And I know, well, there was an attempt to have a negotiation between the two sides. It was. Chris Murphy was at the table, Lankford from Oklahoma, Republican, and they thought they had a framework it was strictly border enforcement. They didn't touch any other visa programs. They didn't do any things that some of the advocates want. It was just basically, we got to strengthen and beef up the border, and it got killed. And it was for political reasons. Lankford came right out and publicly said it. That he was told by McConnell, go in there and negotiate a bill. He negotiated a bill. The union endorsed it, by the way. The Border Patrol union endorsed it. That's a pro-Trump union. And then, like, within a week, it was dead. I mean, and it's just, so that goes back to your question about how do we get this place to function where politics gets put ahead of country? Because it should be country and ahead of politics.
Absolutely. Do you see movement in the next legislative session to possibly solve the problem?
Well, I think there's still interest in seeing about going back to that package and seeing if we can get it done. Again, it's hard to say today until we figure out who's got the gavels and who's going to be in the White House. What happens next?
Let's talk about the cost of living and inflation. What can government do to solve this inflation problem that's confronting all the United States these days?
So, we talked a little bit about housing because that's a big piece of what the rising cost of living. And again, I'm a broken
But we
record.
didn't talk about how the person's going to pay their rent.
No, and that's but I still think that increasing supply is the way you reduce rent and.
But you're also running up against zoning problems.
Yes.
Local ordinances.
Yes.
Rules and regulations. This guy's in a way. That guy doesn't want it. And they don't want it in their backyard. Right. Big problem.
Huge problem. And there's a limit to how much DC can do about that. Having said that, so yesterday I was in Madison, which is a very affluent suburb on the shoreline there. They cut a ribbon for 27 units for Wellington. It's an affordable package there. It went through the entire local process unopposed. They had a town meeting, actually, and everyone voted for it. Because people are finally starting to wake up that, the people who work in town, they can't afford to live in town, and they got to do something about that. And they're hoping to go on to another project down there. But, how you solve that problem at the local level, to me, I think that, they've tried mandates. They had the 10% affordable housing requirement that's there, and the backlash on that has just been, pretty strong. And there's, I mean, Vernon actually is a town that's above 10%, and New London is, and some other communities. But we've got to come up with a consent-based way to get past all this stuff, because towns are going to wither if they can't refresh their population, and housing is key to that. I mean, we talked about prescription drugs, which is a way of getting the drug prices lower. Now it's only for Medicare. We should give employer-based plans that are maybe negotiating collective bargaining the same benefit of those drug reductions, those drug cost reductions that are there. In terms of energy costs that are out there, I mean, the U.S. right now is number one in the world in terms of energy, in terms of oil and gas, 13.5 million barrels a day. I check it on oilprice.com, which is an industry, website that's there. And I mean, you've seen it. I filled up in Willimantic the other 277. There's been progress made in terms of bringing that down. And I think renewable energy projects are great. And the offshore wind, is a great project here. But fossil fuels are going to be around for a while. No, it's not going to be, some mandate that.
Do you agree that the federal government is funding the wind projects?
Well, there's investment tax credits that go into that.
So let's get back to EB a minute, because they're the champion of nuclear reactors. They've been building them for years, and they're flawless.
Yes.
Why wouldn't we encourage EB to go move into the private sector and build nuclear reactors, modular nuclear reactors, to make electricity? And why wouldn't the government fund that and encourage it? Because we desperately need affordable power, especially in Connecticut.
So the reactors actually that go into those submarines are actually built by another company that's down in Virginia. It's PTX is the name of the company that's there. They are getting into modular nuclear. I mean, Bill Gates is putting money into modular. So the state legislature, they lifted the restriction on any expansion in Millstone to allow for modular units to go in there. So I actually think there's pretty strong consensus in terms of moving in that direction. And I think the Inflation Reduction Act actually did allow tax credits for modulars. I mean, it's a clean energy source.
We need it. Yesterday, not tomorrow. But I'm losing my train of thought. I have no retention, Joe. Let's get back to inflation.
Yes.
Can it be solved by government, and what are you seeing with it?
Well, as I said, I think there's ways that you can help by inflation it's a supply and demand problem. There's more demand than there is supply. Prices go up. It's as simple as that. So government has levers it can pull to try and increase supply.
Well, let me give you an example, because I brought you a tutorial. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a 1/2-inch male by sweat adapter used on normally your hot water.
Yeah.
Used to sell for $12. You know what it is today?
I don't know.
$46. Outrageous. I believe that all these companies, including the car manufacturers, are inflating the prices. They're cutting production, and what they're saying is it's a supply chain issue or this issue. And they're screwing us, Joe. I mean, it's bad. How can government fix that problem?
So at state levels, there's anti-price gouging laws. Connecticut actually has one that's there, but we need a national one. Most of it is focused on food prices when it talks about price gouging. But I think the Federal Trade Commission, whose job it is to sort of investigate anti-competitive practices, like the ones that you just described, they should be given that authority.
Well, I hope they do it pretty soon before we run out of money. Another area, and I'm sure you've heard this, another area where the average person is getting gouged is these insurance companies it is unbelievable. You can't. Your insurance rates are going as much as your property taxes, with being unchecked. Is that a federal issue or a state issue?
It's a state issue, but the state of Connecticut Department of Insurance, they do the rate setting, and I know exactly what you're talking about because we just got our renewal for our house.
I hate to get off track, but
No, that's you're not alone.
yeah.
Believe me.
You are hearing that. I'm not.
yes.
I'm not the only jackass in town that,
No.
that has that problem. Other serious problems, which happened recently, the wars, Ukraine, Russia. What do you see? You see any relief there? Why can't we get together, sit down at the table, work this out, whatever it takes? We're killing each other. It's 2024 for crying out loud. We should be working together for mankind.
I couldn't agree with you more. Again, you've got a guy like Putin who, in terms of negotiating, he's a treacherous guy. But having said that, I think if you talk to the military leadership here and talk to European countries over there, and Zelensky's come out and said it himself a few times, at some point there's going to have to be a negotiated ceasefire or settlement of this issue that's there. I don't think Ukraine should be forced to go to the negotiating table at this point because there's too many of their people are under Russia's control. And I mean, there's bad stuff happening even to kids in that area there. But I'll tell you one thing, if you pull out your map of Ukraine and you got the Black Sea and Crimea, which, Putin grabbed that in 2014, that's there. The Ukrainian military has done a great job pushing back on the Russian Navy. The Navy has retreated out of the Black Sea. They've moved all their Navy vessels there because Ukraine has sank about 30% of their Black Sea fleet, and they don't have a Navy. They're doing it with drones and unmanned sea, these little things they can send out into the ocean that's there. And they sunk a submarine, one of their subs that was there. So they're fighting. Those people, I mean, they're committed to, their homeland that's there. And I mean, I meet with a bunch of the Ukrainian Americans in the district here. There's a church up in Willimantic, St. Mary's, which, they have relatives back home. I mean, they do not want Vladimir Putin taking over their country. And Poland, which is right next door, if you look at what they're doing with their military budget, they've increased their military spending but much higher than any other country in Europe because they truly believe they're next if Putin isn't pushed, isn't stopped. But again, I do think at the end of the day, there's going to have to be a settlement.
Oddly enough, we don't hear a lot about Ukraine, or at least for the last 6 or 8 weeks since the Israeli-Palestinian things. Tell us a little bit about what you know about that conflict, and is there resolve on the horizon? I mean,
so I think if you look at what Israel has around it, you've got Iran who's has declared over and over again they want to eliminate the state of Israel. You've got Hezbollah in Lebanon, north of Israel, who again are committed to the same goal, and then obviously you got Hamas in Gaza. Right now, between how they have degraded Hamas almost out of existence, Hezbollah they wiped out their leadership and have pushed back from the Israeli border of northern border, and then they basically struck Iran just the last week or so. In my opinion, it's time for them to claim victory and start and take the deal that the UN has agreed to in Gaza, which again does not allow Hamas to just pop back up again like whack-a-mole. I mean, they actually have a plan to secure that area. Israel does not want to be in the business of, in my opinion, of occupying Gaza. They tried that years ago, and Ariel Sharon, who was the former general, tough guy and everything, he said we're done. He pulled them back because their military is not big enough to do all that. So the deal's on the table, and in my opinion, Netanyahu should take it, and I think that would reduce the tension in those other areas like Lebanon and Iran.
I don't understand anything anymore. I guess I never did, but it just seems to me like at this time in our lives as we get older, the world is getting...
No, it's a perilous time.
And as far as a congressman or representative is concerned, these are more important times than ever. Your job was supposed to be getting easier. 10 years from the start, your start, it's getting harder. And what do you see happening next legislative session? What
So-
agenda? What's your agenda?
Well,
What do you want to?
number one, the Trump tax law expires in 2025. That doesn't get talked about a lot, but personally, I feel like one of the worst things in that law was that it capped the deduction on state and local taxes. I mean, when you do your tax return now, you can only deduct up to $10,000 on what you paid to the state of Connecticut for income tax in the city or the town of Waterford for Waterford, right? Or East Lyme is where you're from.
I live in East Lyme.
That's right. Okay. So it used to be you could deduct the entire amount off your taxes. They capped it at $10,000, which in Connecticut, a lot of homeowners took a big hit when that was done, and it was used to pay for other stuff Trump wanted. So I want to get rid of that salt. They call it the salt cap. I want to get rid of that because that actually is going to help home ownership, where you can deduct the cost of what you're paying local government. I mean, you're paying tax on tax once you hit that cap now, which is outrageous, actually. And there's other provisions in there. They took away the deduction for what they call property casualty loss. If you have a crumbling foundation, like a lot of my neighbors do up in Vernon, they got screwed when that happened. And we should restore the deductibility of fixing your house when you've been, basically,
I thought there was a fund for that.
The state put a fund in for that, but there's a lot of out-of-pocket costs that still homeowners have to pay for that. And it's done a great job, but that taking away that deduction, so what happens is that it'll pay for your foundation. But I mean, if you ever go to one of those sites, I mean, the driveways are gone, they're torn up, the steps are gone, and so that's all out of pocket. People should be able to get a deduction for that, which has always been in the tax code prior to Trump's law.
Now, would that be an act of Congress? They would
Yes.
have to propose that and vote
So
on it?
the question right now is some of these provisions, because they sunset, if we do nothing, they bounce right back, they come back. So, but we're still trying to figure that out for the next session that's there. And there were part of the law that you'd want to protect because there was some tax relief for lower income taxpayers there, but the giveaway at the top was really outrageous, and that's one of the reasons why the deficit got worse.
Speaking of the deficit, where are we with that now, and what are your thoughts?
So the deficit, as I said, it went up when the tax law passed. It went way up during COVID because there was a lot of programs that had to get funded. It came back down as those programs expired, but it's still too high. And as I said, I think this sunsetting of the tax law is going to give the next Congress an opportunity to cut the deficit more.
So, Joe, Matt just gave me the signal, but before we close, I just want to say I wanted to dedicate this show today to one of your biggest fans who passed away, Bob Kozak.
Yes.
And Bob would do anything for you, and I'm sure he's voting twice for you up in heaven, however he's going to do it. And certainly we have with us today, and you mentioned Keith Brothers and Ricky Free from the International Labor Organization. Keith is probably the most influential labor leader
Sure is.
In the whole state of Connecticut. Richie Messina, former business agent with 777. You've enjoyed the support from organized labor well-deservedly for years, and that's for sure. Special thanks to your office, Matt and Sam, and a special thanks to Reggie. Could you sum up with anything that you would like to finish off with before?
Well, first of all, thank you for recognizing Bob, who, again, was true blue. And when we were talking about taxes just now, he would have been so excited. Because he was like a dog with a bone when he gave him like a tax issue to talk about. And, the trades, have really, I say this all the time. Sometimes people think, oh, all the unions care about is just, their own, collective bargaining benefits. But no, in Washington, we would not have gotten an infrastructure bill if it wasn't for the building trades. And I mean, that's a fact. And in terms of the shipyard, again, the folks in the metal trades union, they've been real allies in terms of getting a strong budget for the Navy. So look, people ask me all the time, how can you stand it, the job? But to me, the thing that always gets me out of bed in the morning is it's a great district, and I mean that sincerely. Whether it's way up in Suffield, and Vernon up in that area, or Quiet Corner, or down along the coastline. It's a special place. We had an Australian minister come to visit the shipyard, and he spent a couple days here, and we were saying goodbye, after the meetings wrapped up, and Pat Conroy was his name, and he comes over to me and just said, you're very lucky. You have a really nice constituency, as they call it in Australia, that's there. And I remember walking away thinking, wow, that's pretty amazing. A guy who lives 10,000 miles away, and came up here, and he could see right away what sometimes people overlook. We're very lucky in this part of
Joe,
the country.
we're very lucky, and we don't appreciate it because we have a beautiful. I put our area, living in our area, it is better than any place in the world.
I'm with you.
And sometimes we overlook it. We don't appreciate it. It's a great place to work and live. Certainly, we wish you the best of luck in the election.
my friend.
And thank you. And we've. I have looked at you not as my congressman, and many people feel like this. We feel like you're a friend, Joe. And
Well,
thank
that
you
means a lot.
Thank you for all you've done. Thanks for taking the time to come on the show. Murray, reporting from the city, too tough to die in London.